Hello folks, this is Paul and I'm the lead designer here at Piranha Games. Today we're going to be going over the planned update for the matchmaker found in Faction Play that will be released later this year. The main purpose behind this part of the update is to collapse the current queue system into something that is a lot more streamlined and more efficient than what is currently on the live servers. One of the biggest contention points out there when it comes to the matchmaker is that teamwork is overpowered. A coordinated team of 12 players using comms and drop calling is a major force to be reckoned with. A 12-player group consisting of solo-minded players is not going to be as organized or strategic as a skilled 12-player unit who plays often together. While not perfect, this new system will focus on making sure that 12-player groups are playing against other 12-player groups if there are enough of them queued up to play during the conflict event. To start with, the Faction Play event system will divide all queued groups and players into the respective factions that they chose when joining the current conflict. These factions can be any combination of Inner Sphere versus Inner Sphere, or Clan versus Clan, or IS versus Clan. It will always be a two-sided conflict and players can choose which faction they wish to fight for. Once the players have been separated into their faction queues, they'll be then filtered into group or solo players. A global timer will kick off matches every 2 to 5 minutes. This timer can be adjusted to whatever works best. When the timer hits 0, it will start creating matches. This is where the key update is going to happen when it comes to matchmaking. The matchmaker at this point is going to start looking at the player combinations in both faction queues. It will then sort the groups based on their size and also sort the solo players based on their SSR rating. Once the sort has finished on both faction queues, it's time to start matching groups from each faction queue against each other. Since the groups are sorted based on size, the matchmaker will be pitting the biggest groups against the biggest groups. In this case, we have 12-player groups in each faction queue. The first 12-player group from Faction A is pitted against the first 12-player group from Faction B. For Match 2, we have a 12-player group in Faction A and we'll match them against a 10-player group from Faction B. Now, because of the way larger groups play, they would benefit from other group-minded players joining their team rather than two random players. So here, the first 2-player group from Faction B will be used to fill the gap on the Faction B side. The matchmaker can now move on to Match 3. In this case, the matchmaker is going to grab the 10-player group from Faction A and then the 5-player group from Faction B, keeping the matching of biggest groups first in mind. Next, the matchmaker will look at Faction A and see if there are any groups that will fit into the match. In this case, there's an 8-player group available, but that's too big for the match, so the matchmaker moves on and finds the 2-player group. Moving this 2-player group into Match 3, Faction A fills the team's requirements and the matchmaker continues to finalize the team on Faction B. In this case, there's only a single 2-player group remaining. This 2-player group is then added to Faction B's team. Now there are only 7 players on Faction B's team. This is where the matchmaker starts filling the team with solo players. Because this is going to be a combined team of group and solo players, the matchmaker is going to use SSR to determine who the most experienced solo players are and use them to fill the team consisting of group players. An experienced solo player generally knows the ins and outs of faction play and is more likely to benefit the group players on their team. 5 solo players from Faction B's solo queue are now used to fill the team. Time to move on to Match 4. Maintaining group first prioritization, Match 4 will take all of the remaining groups from Faction A. Since Faction B no longer has any groups in queue, the matchmaker will start using Faction B's solo players to create a team. And since I've been rushing this video, I didn't leave enough room for more solo players. I'm actually going to magically just add these folks into the queue. The matchmaker now has enough players to form a team of 12 solo players from Faction B. Please look away from the screen for 2 seconds. There, a 12-player team. Yes, by the logic I mentioned earlier about groups generally being more organized than solo players, Match 4 isn't going to look pretty. However, because of the use of high sorted SSR for solo players, the matchmaker will do its best to make sure that the most experienced solo players are going to end up against these groups. Now that both factions do not have groups in their queues, it's a matter of matching solo players against solo players in both factions. There's a spider behind you. So the matchmaker is now making a match using all the remaining solo players and using their SSR ratings to prioritize them into matches. Now, all kidding aside, the previous queue with missing opponents, while highly unlikely, can happen. Without magically adding more solo players to Faction B, the matchmaker would have stalled on creating a match for the remaining solo players in Faction A. This is where a prioritization system comes into play, telling the matchmaker that anyone left out of a match for this drop cycle is prioritized to be used first in the next cycle of matches kicking off. While the preceding information was included in the internal update document, there's still room for a few more adjustments. This includes an average SSR for groups to match them a little better, prioritization for Loyalist groups over Merc units, and prioritization for Loyalist solo players over regular solo players. To keep this video concise and to the point, I'll end it here and gain further feedback on what you think of this implementation. We'll continue to use the current feedback thread to keep the discussion moving forward. Again, thank you for your time and look forward to the upcoming discussion and implementations. See you later.